Oh boy, we are in trouble now. People, Amnesty International has mustered its moral authority and fired a missile not at Korea or Iran or the former Soviet Union called Russia or China or any place with real human rights abuses. No, Amnesty International has shot their little pellet gun at Jason Kenney and Vic Taves. Why? Because they have released the names and photos of people who have been determined by our Immigration and Refugee Board to be suspects of foreign war criminals and to be deported. Here's a copy of their letter on the screen right now. Joining me to talk about the fact that our country now has this terrible black mark on it is Jerry Agar, host of News Talk 1010 and a Sun News Network contributor. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Now, is this a black mark on Canada that Amnesty International takes itself away from everything less important to say, hey, you guys shouldn't be naming war criminals?
No. As a matter of fact, Jason Kenney, the letter you're holding in your hands there, I thought it was a brilliant letter. As a matter of fact, as he responds to Amnesty International, an organization he says he joined when he was a teenager, and that at the time they were fighting against real abuses, and he says they have now, basically, these are my words, smeared their moral authority here that they have built up over the years to try and say that the real problem here is the fact that we have identified, and as he points out in the letter, identified through a number of hearings and evidence, not just, okay, fine, we'll just go ahead and call these guys war criminals because we don't like the way they look. It's a ridiculous assertion on Amnesty International's part.
Jerry, let's read a quote from Amnesty's letter, and then we'll read from Jason Kenney's letter. Okay, so here is something that Amnesty International wrote to Canada. The fact that these individuals' faces and names have been so widely publicized is of particular concern. In addition to reputational harm, it may increase the risk that they face upon deportation or put their relatives at risk. So Amnesty International is saying, don't pick on these people. They're war criminal suspects. They've been found to be bad guys, but you're naming them and shaming them, and we at Amnesty care about that. Have they lost their moral compass, Jerry? I mean, surely they should be on the side of the good guys against suspected war criminals.
Okay, and I realize there might be people who say, well, how do you know they're the bad guys? Well, again, in this, I think, terrific letter that Jason Kenney wrote, his Citizenship and Immigration Minister, he says one of them, in one case, has actually admitted to helicoptering into villages to indiscriminately machine gun women and children and take away other people to torture them.
Jimmy's just saying that you're a war criminal.
He admitted it. So wouldn't you want to round a guy like that up and get him out of the country? And Canada is, I think, caring enough and kind enough, this is the kind of thing that Amnesty International wants to worry about, that even in the face of that sort of abuse by this individual of other citizens, he will not be deported if there is fear of the death penalty or of his human rights being violated. So I don't know how much further Canada can go.
We're going to look at a few parts of Jason Kenney's letter here because his response, you're right, Jason Kenney, for your organization to muster its powers of suasion. Well, it'll just roll away. It's a long letter, so in the background we'll put it out there. But he makes it. He goes through it methodically. He doesn't give it short shrift, and you can tell it was written by Kenney himself and not just a staffer. I mean, he talks about he joined Amnesty International as a high school. I mean, Jason Kenney. He's immigration minister. He's citizenship minister, but he's also been the minister who's sort of taken it upon himself to go around the world for people like Hussein Salil, a Canadian in prison in China. He goes around the world on real human rights cases, Zhao Ziyang in China. So I think he must have been shocked when Amnesty International pointed a finger at him.
I would think so, and he seems to be reacting that way. And he's not holding back. This was definitely not written by a diplomat. This was written by somebody who was going to speak his mind. He seems angry, as a matter of fact, that he would be declared, and Vic Taves would be declared, the bad guys. And listen, we always put forth, well, the CBC won't, but most of us in the media will cooperate with law enforcement in disseminating the information necessary to get dangerous people off the streets, to get wanted people off the streets. Here's a quick analogy. A lady in Edmonton, I don't know if you've talked about this story. She's homeless, she's 17, she's HIV positive, and she's a danger because she's not telling people she's having sex with that she's HIV positive. Now, a little blame to themselves on people who are having sex with the homeless, but still, she's a danger on the street. Right? So they identify her, immediately they catch her, then they withdrew her picture and her name because she's a youth, but they got her off the streets, and now the Edmonton police are being criticized because they wanted a dangerous person off the street. There's a real upside-down view of all of this.
That's a great point. You know, can I was just skimming this letter because I just got it put in my hot little hands a moment ago. Let me read from Jason back to Amnesty International. I'm just going to choose the last two sentences. He says, this is Jason writing to Amnesty, your calls for more time, more process, more deference, and more protection for war criminals and serious human rights violators, by contrast, comes across as self-congratulatory moral preening. I have listened to your concerns, and frankly, I prefer the common sense of the people and the law. He's basically saying, buzz off and take on real problems. Yeah,
yes.
I want to ask you this. To what extent have these so-called human rights groups, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, being co-opted and are no longer about real human rights, but are about fashionable leftist causes?
Well, unfortunately, these organizations always seem to go that way. It happened with Greenpeace. One of the founders finally got out because he couldn't take it anymore. You know, they come in with something that really makes sense, but unfortunately, somehow, radical left seems to take these organizations over, and reason and common sense has gone out the door here.
Jerry, I tell you, I'm getting revved up. Reading this letter's getting me revved up. I feel like going out, looking at the photos, and doing a little bounty hunting. You want to come out with me? There's no prize other than the moral pride of taking these back.
Okay.
You want to go bounty hunting with me?
I am in black, but I don't think either one of us is going to look as cool as Dog the Bounty Hunter.
We'll give it a shot. Jerry Agar from AM 1010 Radio here in Toronto. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey, folks, looks like some of you were celebrity spotting me last night on the street. Your hate mail. After the break, that's ahead on The Source.